Pacers offseason preview, jam-packing the next 2 weeks of craziness for the Pacers into this podcast. High level on every single thing you need to know about the Pacers offseason, including the questions they have to answer before they do anything on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, time to pivot to off-season mode for the Pacers because it's June 25th. They've been done playing for 2 full days, and it is time to look at the offseason because the draft starts tonight. The Pacers don't have a pick. Hopefully, for my content purposes, they don't trade into the first round tonight, or else I will not have given you any draft preview content in time for the draft. Oops. We'll talk about the draft tomorrow because the Pacers do have a second-round pick, and the second round is on Thursday. Today, we will trudge through the rest of the offseason, everything you need to know as high level as possible because I don't have enough time to get super nitty-gritty today up through free agency. We'll get nitty-gritty on basically everything I'm talking about today. But I've been writing down every question I've gotten from fans. I've been typing down what I think the order of operations for the Pacers offseason to be, the most important thing, the lesser important things, and everything that you need to know. And I think that any discussion of the Pacers offseason doesn't actually start with any one player or any one thing. It actually starts with question one: what is next season about for the Pacers? Their front office has to huddle up, get together, and decide exactly that. Because without Tyrese Haliburton, it is very easy to say two things. It is very easy to say, well, it could be a development year. People use this term for the Bucks without Dame or the Celtics without Tatum, a gap year, right? A gap year. And the Pacers are fortunate that they got their own pick back in that trade they made with the Pelicans. But okay, that's fine if it's a gap year. What do you want that gap year to be about, right? Is it about your good players, your already good players, developing different skills that will help them when Tyrese Haliburton is back? Is it about your younger players getting better so that they may be more valuable when Tyrese Haliburton is back? Is it developing other kinds of play styles, enhancing different parts of your game? And obviously, you don't know this. You'd like to win as many games as possible. They're too good. They have an all-star on their team right now and lots of other good players. They're too good to be awful, right? So I think they're going to be good. So how do they balance all those things? How good can they actually be? And how much can they even control that given the talent that they have? What is next season about? That's step one of the offseason. And all these questions and steps I'm talking about will bleed into everything else we're talking about today. Step two for the Pacers is the one that I've been asked the most about, and that is they have to determine their spending limits. And I will tell you lots of things that none of you know about because it's super cap dorky that really matter for the Pacers in setting their spending limits for the offseason. If Tyrese Haliburton wasn't hurt, this would be easy. Yep. Keep everybody going to the tax, make it happen, run it back. Let's go. Try to get back to the stage they were just on, the NBA Finals. Does their current reality change their spending limit, right? You pay the luxury tax and you have a luxury level team. They certainly will when Tyrese Haliburton is back in 2 years. This next specific season, does that change things? Especially because there's something called the repeater tax. And so putting off the luxury tax until the best possible time is actually tactically smart, even if obviously for fans, the best scenario is the owner pays as much money as possible for the best team possible every single season. And then step three is, okay, you have your direction set for this upcoming one season. You have your spending limits, and you have to combine those two things. And so while one thing might fit the direction and not the spending limit, or another thing might fit the spending limit but not the direction, the blend is important, and that's where priorities will matter. And those 4 minutes to start this podcast, I think, are the most important thing because you as a fan might have different answers to those two questions than the Pacers themselves do based on what you think they should be doing in 26-27, based on how good you think Tyrese Haliburton will be when he comes back, based on how good you think players on the team will be when he comes back. So the answers to those questions are all different, and I think the Pacers will tell us their own answers to those questions with the moves they make in the next 2 weeks. But that is step one of the offseason. But step two, the biggest thing that you need to know about their offseason is let's talk about the tax and what is actually coming towards the Pacers before we get into any individuals, because obviously you want to know about Myles Turner. We'll talk about him a lot. We'll talk about Bennedict Mathurin a lot, and we'll talk about lots of other players that you didn't even realize were central to the Pacers offseason. We'll talk about the disabled player exception, so many things. So the luxury tax, right? Right now, I am talking to you. The Pacers have 10 guaranteed contracts for next season on their books. Those 10 players are Tyrese Haliburton, Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, TJ McConnell, Bennedict Mathurin, Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, and Johnny Furphy. Tony Bradley has a team option. I will tell you now that even if the Pacers want Tony Bradley back on their team, they will be declining that team option because his minimum salary is less than that option amount, and they can sign him for a lower number. And every dollar matters a ton to the Pacers. So operate on your assumptions that the Pacers have 10 players right now under contract, 5 technically roster spots. That's not important right now. Those 10 players sum to a salary of $165 million. Over the salary cap, don't talk about cap space. Those 10 are $11 million over. The luxury tax line is 180, just under 188 million this coming season, assuming no changes from the projections given the new TV deal. I don't think anyone assumes that. So that puts the Pacers, without doing a thing, about 22 million, maybe 23 million under the tax, with no Myles Turner, with no center at all, right? That's without Tony Bradley, without Thomas Bryant, without Myles Turner, without Isaiah Jackson, and the fifth departing free agent being James Johnson. That's a lot of front court loss, and that's 23 million to fit in all of that. I will do a slight projection here, but I'll talk more about Myles Turner in the second segment. However, plug in Myles Turner, high 20s, 30, low 30s, whatever number you want. If you don't think they should bring back Myles Turner, that's not relevant to what I'm saying. But if you just plug in Myles Turner at that number, they already go over the tax. Then a minimum for a backup center and maybe a little over a minimum or a minimum for Isaiah Jackson, and then a little bit for, some veteran point guard that they need. And they're like 13 to 14 million over the tax now, right? It's very easy to see how quickly they get over given their infrastructure. I will not talk about We'll get to what they can do about that in a second. But what that means is, let's talk about what the luxury tax actually is, right? So you pay your salaries to your players, and that is how much your team costs until you hit the luxury tax line, which is that number just under $188 million, right? So this coming season, actually, this been so easy for the Pacers, would have been the easiest time ever for them to pay the tax, because the new CBA is implementing this season new rules about how the luxury tax works. So from every dollar over the luxury tax, from 0 to 5.7 million over, it's 1-to-1 in tax. So that means is, for the first 5.7 million over the tax so team salary, you pay 5.7 million in luxury taxes, right? So your team gets that much more expensive. For the next group band of salaries, if you're 5.701 million over to 11.4 million over, every dollar in that range, which is whatever that is, the next 5.7 million, it's 1.25 to 1, right? So still not that punitive. Like, it's more. You're paying twice as much for the player, but it's not that much. After that, it skyrockets to 3.5 to 1 and then 5 to 1, right? That is where the big jumping point is. And so people talk about the luxury tax line being this big line, or the first apron, which is only 8 million over the luxury tax and 96 million basically, right? And those are important barriers. But to me, there is no way to me at the Pacers' current talent level they will go over it line is 11.4 million over the tax. In that hypothetical scenario I just ran through, with Turner at just under 28 million in the first year and it going up, and then the minimum centers and a random point guard, right? They're about 13 million over. That's too much, right? So they'd have to be a little creative to get under that tax line I described. And that's only if that is their spending limit. So I hope what you just learned is that, on one hand, good news for the Pacers. This is different than past seasons. It's actually less punitive to be barely over the luxury tax this coming season. That's the first time that's happened since I've been really covering the league in the salary cap. On the other hand, if you're over the tax, you still lose the tax reimbursement you get from other teams. And of course, you're actually in the tax. You're paying it, right? And so that's the thing the Pacers have to decide is, are they willing to go into it at all? Because if they were going to be as good as they were last year, as good as they thought they were, yeah, easy peasy. Now it's a little more challenging of a discussion. And so I think what the Pacers would like to do if they had truth serum, and what I think makes the most sense, is to try to finish their offseason in a place where they are within striking distance of getting under the tax. Here's what people keep missing when they keep asking me questions or when they're thinking about the offseason. You don't have to start the season under the tax. You have to finish the season under the tax. Let's pretend, for hypothetical scenario here, you start the NBA season $6 million in salaries over the tax line. And then at the trade deadline, you have a player who's making $7.5 million. You trade that player away for no salary in return. You're under the tax, right? You're under. right? You don't have to get into the year under. So the Pacers don't have to worry about the line right away. They just have to put themselves in a situation where there are realistic or feasible trades that are doable that get them under during the season if things are going bad. For example, what I mean by that is, let's say that they believe that, and this is, let's say they believe they're going to be a, 45 win team next year or something like that. And that's good enough. And like they, maybe that's enough to pay the tax because, Haliburton's coming back and blah, blah, blah. But then they're not as good, right? They get to the trade deadline and they're like 5 games under 500. Well, great. Then you'd want to be under the tax. And so you'd want to be within that striking distance. That is like a reasonable way to operate to me. And if anything, that would be the smartest thing to do because that maximizes flexibility, gives you the most chance to evaluate all your assets possible. However, that's easier said than done. It's not easy to move money in the current CBA environment, especially as the Nets just started eating their cap space with trades. On Tuesday, we saw them taking Terrence Mann. So that's the first thing to know, is that those are the tax rules. So thing one, you should know about the tax. It doesn't count if you're over before the season starts. It matters at the end. Thing two is that $11.4 million over mark seems, in my own head, just as somebody who really likes to study the salary cap, would be what I would consider a barrier for the Pacers if I were just making stuff up. I don't know what they actually think, but that's what I think. Thing two to note is the first apron. What is the first apron? Welcome to salary cap class. I'll make this quick because it's kind of boring, but it's important for the Pacers. Their first apron, new thing in the new CBA. It is $196 million this season, just a bit over the luxury tax threshold. If you cross the first apron, if your team's total salary goes over that number, you cannot take back more salary than you send out in trades. You can't use the non-tax pyramid level exception. You can only use the smaller $5.7 million mid-level exception. You can't acquire any player via sign and trade. You can't use a trade exception that was created in prior seasons. The Pacers have one from James Wiseman, even though it's functionally unusable. You can't use the biannual exception, and you can't sign a player who was bought out whose original salary was over the non-tax pyramid level exception. It's not nearly as punitive as the second apron, but it still comes with a lot of restrictions that teams would like to avoid. So that's another potential salary barrier that's lower than that $11 million over the tax line. So keep your eyes on those numbers. Those will be what I'm talking to you a lot about in the coming weeks. I think that Turner, my expectation or my presumption is that the Pacers will try to keep him. They should. He's great, and I'll explain why in a second. But that will take them over the tax. So how can they balance the two numbers I just said, that $11.4 million over the tax and the first apron? That is what I think is much more critical to think about with their offseason. Now let's talk about specific players, because you needed to know all those details to really have all the information to know what we're talking about. Let's talk about Myles Turner, Bennedict Mathurin, Obi Toppin, and plenty other players that you didn't even realize were important in this Pacers offseason. Before we do so, going to tell you guys about Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you just wait for him? No, probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Lets you manage business calls and text from a single app. They have a shared inbox feature, so your team can jump in any conversation instantly. And they have an AI agent that handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering Locked On Pacers listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. How about that? That's openphone, openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have an existing number with another service, Open Phone will port them all over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making me your first listen today and every single day of the offseason. So many choices for your second listen. Here come the trades. Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Locked On Celtics with more on those. Locked On Hawks, Locked On Nets, Locked On Blazers. The Jordan Poole's on the move to the Pelicans, Locked On Wizards, and Locked On Pelicans. It's happening. The draft is here. The finals just ended. I barely feel like the offseason started, although everybody else has been in it for a month or 2 months. Okay. Let's talk about the players. I know a lot of people are interested in this, but I felt like the first part was more important for you to know what's actually happening with the Pacers. Obviously, the central figure and the biggest part of the Pacers offseason is Myles Turner. He's a free agent. He's not eligible to be extended, so nothing can happen until July 1st. The Pacers have full bird rights on him, meaning they can offer anything to Myles Turner. Up to 5 years, up to his maximum salary. He's not a max player, but you get what I'm saying. Any legal contract, they can offer it to him. And he could take it, right? That's good. They should be happy to have that flexibility because there's not a lot of cap space in the league right now. Detroit can get to a decent amount, probably not quite enough for Myles Turner, and they probably shouldn't really want to, given the reality of the free agency period. I think their executives kind of tip their hand on what their option is going to look like and their media availability this week. The Grizzlies might get to some cap space, but they're certainly saving it for a renegotiation and extension of Jaren Jackson Jr. And the Nets have a good amount of cap space, but they also have a good amount of cap holds, and they just chewed up some of their cap space, taking in Terrence Mann. They also have Nick Claxton on their team. There's not a lot of Myles Turner spots that don't require cooperation from the Pacers via sign and trade. And I don't know why they would do that, because Myles Turner's good and fits on the Pacers. Thing one, people are too focused on the finals. Myles Turner did not play well. Myles Turner would be the first person to tell you he didn't play well. I'm not even saying that to excuse him for this discussion. There was also 100 games before that. People are really overstating what happened in the Knicks series. He wasn't as effective, but he was fine. And in the first 2 rounds, he was quite good. In the regular season, he was quite good. And he's been healthy the last 2 years. Maybe he doesn't fit quite as well on a non-Haliburton team. Guess what? Tyrese Haliburton will be back on the life of his next contract. They should try to line it up with Siakam's deal. A 3-year deal makes sense to me. Turner could get back into free agency when he's 32. It's extension possible if it's 3 years instead of 2. 4 years might be too long, maybe not. It just seems like the perfect sweet spot for Turner and the Pacers. Maybe a 4th year. Shorter than 3 doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot of you listening, I can tell because of the questions I'm getting, just don't think Myles Turner is worth what the market value for good centers is. I don't know what to say to you. It's just what good centers cost, and the Pacers do not have the resources to sign a player for more than the $14.1 million mid-level. And they can only use that if they lose Turner. If they keep him and go over the tax and into the first apron, they can't use the big mid-level, right? So thing one is he's good, and I think he was better than Jarrett Allen, who got paid more than him last summer. I think something in the 3. I've been saying 3 for 80 during the season. I think it's probably more than that now because he's had 2 straight more good than bad playoffs. My prediction I'll make right now is 3 for 90, although I think lots of people like hearing 100. So it's possible it's 3 for 100 with some funny money in terms of, bonuses. He had bonuses in his last deal, or, trade kickers or stuff like that. So it sounds awesome when it's 100 million on the press release, but it's not actually 100 million. That's just what I think. So here's what people are missing. People keep saying, well, now that Haliburton's gone, they can't pay Turner. Yes, they can. They should. He's good. You should want to pay good players to be on your team because Tyrese Haliburton's only going to miss a season. He's going to be back, and Myles Turner's still good. Yes, no one on the whole team will be as effective without Tyrese Haliburton. That's why he's so good. But you still should keep your good players. 1, because 2, because imagine a scenario in the future where the Pacers want to trade for a high salary player. Usually stars have high salaries. If they don't have Myles Turner and his salary slot, it is functionally impossible for them to do so. It was already functionally hard for them to trade for Cam Johnson this season. If you remember me talking about that back in December or whatever it was. And he makes $25 million, right? That was challenging. If anyone makes 40 plus, it's without just trading Siakam, it's almost impossible, right? You need that salary slot. You need players in that high 20s to low 30s range. It's just valuable to have them, especially when they're a good player who fits your team well and is still in their 20s. Maybe they're an age gracefully, great. Then it's not that long of a deal. It's so obvious to me that they should be wanting to keep Myles Turner because there's no alternative. There is no way to get a center as good as him. They can't do it without a trade. Why trade when you have him on the team and you have his bird rights right now? People keep asking about leverage. I know that no other teams really have enough space for Turner, but also the Pacers don't have a way to get a center as good as Turner. I kind of just think it comes out in the wash. I think they'll negotiate in good faith. They've been together for so long. This seems easy to me. So the key questions to me are more about, the Pacers want to go longer with the deal and maybe a little bit more money so that the first year salary will be lower. But do they want to do that? Do they want to offer a 4th year? Can they get the last year half guaranteed? That sounds great for the Pacers. It sounds dumb if you're Myles Turner. How can they do this? People will ask about no trade clauses. The Pacers should absolutely not do that, even though he is eligible for one. I think what I suggested makes the most sense is that they'll have a meeting. They'll try to woo him and keep him because he's good and he fits well with their team and he fits well with their culture and he's been there for forever. And they'll settle on a deal that makes sense in the, high 20s, low 30s range. That seems totally reasonable to me. Jarrett Allen, Porzingis, Isaiah Hartenstein, go on and on with the centers about in that range that are very good and play well in the playoffs. That's what they land at. If that is where Turner is, they're going to be over the tax. And so that brings you to the rest of the conversations. Zoom out. Maybe the Pacers just don't care. Maybe they're willing to go all the way up to that second tax threshold I talked about in the first segment. Then all the rest of these players, it's not as hard. You just keep all of them and see who develops and see who learns how to fit in the system and see who doesn't and see who can be a part of the next great Pacers team and see who might not be, right? You'll have more minutes to offer other guards. You'll have more minutes potentially in the front court, right? With so many centers on the free agent marketplace for this Pacers team, like, it's very easy to think that way, but it's also not, because of what I said earlier, where they're not going to be as good. And there's a chance they're, even in a crummy East, trying to figure out where they sit in the pecking order come trade deadline time and want to get under the tax. So where does that bring me next? That brings me to the next couple of guys to talk about, which are Obi Toppin, TJ McConnell, and Bennedict Mathurin. Let's talk about those guys and plenty more. Man, I'm going way longer than I thought to wrap up today's Locked On Pacers. Before we talk about any of them, let's talk about Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you are wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. They have everything you need to level up your outdoor space on Wayfair: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. I just got some of those. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. Whatever you want to redesign, they can help you. New outdoor dining sets, modern lounge chairs, Adirondack chairs. The delivery is free, fast, and totally hassle-free. It fits your style, even the larger items. So now, whether you're hosting friends or just unwinding with a book, it genuinely feels like your own private retreat. Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making me your first listen today and every single day. Listen number 2, interesting draft teams. The draft is tonight. The Sixers are interesting to me. The Thunder are interesting to me. The Raptors are interesting to me. Or Locked On NBA to hear me talk about all of these things with Wes Goldberg. Okay, let's talk about Ben Mathurin. I was going to try to be brief on all this stuff. I've been terrible at it. Ben Mathurin is extension eligible. I find it very hard to imagine the Pacers and Ben Mathurin coming to an extension, because how much are the Pacers willing to pay for Ben Mathurin? And Aaron Nesmith still on the team. Andrew Nembhard's still on the team. Tyrese Haliburton's coming back. All those guys will still be there the year Tyrese Haliburton comes back. Bennedict Mathurin will more than likely continue to have a bench role for the Pacers going forward. He's quite good. Bennedict Mathurin probably thinks he's better than a bench role, and he should. He's had very high peaks, shown a lot of potential, was awesome in a finals game, right? That seems like a difference of opinion. And it's not even a difference of opinion that's necessarily wrong. It's just how the Pacers are built, right? That's part one. Part two is the Pacers are already getting expensive. They pay Turner and going to the tax. Follow up 1 year, they have like no one going into free agency besides Mathurin, right? Ben Mathurin's a free agent 2026, 27. That's it. Of their current guys in their team, obviously. Anybody who signs a 1 year deal would be 2. Everybody else still under contract that year, right? Ben Shepherd, Jarris Walker, TJ McConnell, Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin, Pascal Siakam, Tyrese Haliburton, Nembhard, Furphy, all of them under contract for that year too. So it's not like they're just magically going to have a ton of extra room to pay Ben Mathurin a ton of more money, right? They're going to run into a similar problem with him. That's not to say they shouldn't want to explore what Ben Mathurin's future is. They're just going to run into a financial challenge. Now, they do have a season coming that could be more about development, and that might make it more palatable to have Ben Mathurin on the team and see where things go. But pretend it goes awesome, well, then they'll have to trade other guys in a year from now. Maybe that's a problem they'll cross later. I'm not saying they should be rushing to get rid of Ben Mathurin or anything, but it's certainly a question they need to have, right? If they know that it's unlikely an extension gets done, because what's he worth, right? Trey Murphy money, Jalen Green money, less than those guys, right? If he gets those guys kind of money, this is a second apron team. Maybe they're willing to pay it. I would be skeptical. See also Boston Celtics the last 2 days. So where does that leave them with Ben Mathurin? If they're not going to extend him, he is a guy who, in theory, to me, could be someone they explore what they could get for him because of the financial stuff I said with the tax to potentially get under. I'm not saying he should be the guy that they move. I'm saying I see why they would, given his impending free agency. And it's always been the same discussions with him about fit. It's not about his talent at all. He's very good. For those reasons, other teams could, in theory, want him. But I was talking about this at the trade deadline. When Nate Duncan was on this podcast, we talked about Ben Mathurin, right? It's reasonable to me he would be discussed. I'm not saying they should do it. In fact, I think it's possible that with a bridge season or a gap year, whatever you want to call it, he could start and be very valuable and learn a lot of things and make them, think about trading other guys to make sure they can pay him. But I do understand why he'd be somebody they consider moving, because if they are, let's say, $13 million over the tax, and Ben Mathurin makes $9 million, and they can do some funny stuff with a non-guaranteed 14th player and do a dance at the deadline and then shed, a small salary at the trade deadline, and bada bing, bada boom, you're out of the tax, right? Like, it's that simple. I'm not saying this is something they should do. I just think because of Ben Mathurin's extension and his impending free agency, what they have to figure out what they're doing. They have to have a meeting as a parties and say, what is the goal here? And also, if you're Ben Mathurin, like, think about what he might want. If he wants to get paid as much as possible, is the Pacers the best spot for that if his role is the same? If he is starting next year with Haliburton out, maybe it is, but maybe it's not. So a meeting between those two is important, right? Figure out what the plan is for the coming season. Because there's totally a world to me where Bennedict Mathurin in a gap year just has a rock star season. The Pacers figure out the best way to work around him. But there's also a world to me where the Pacers say, you know what? This has always been, a fit challenge going both ways. The money just probably won't work. Let's explore what the value of this guy is on the trade market. And they might live to regret that forever because he has a ton of potential. But that's why they would consider it. For similar reasons, Obi Toppin, I got to keep an eye on. TJ McConnell makes about in that salary range as well. The difference is McConnell plays point guard, and the Pacers really need point guards now after Tyrese Haliburton got hurt. And TJ McConnell is a very consummate professional. Not that Obi Toppin isn't, but it's just a guy they love and would love to have around. So is Toppin. They love Obi Toppin. Obviously, they paid him to keep him last year. Those two guys just make right in the salary range that you're going to hear their name a lot, right? $14 million for Toppin. Like, if they could cleanly get off of that, they'd be under the tax, but they'd be worse. Do they want to do that? They have him for 3 more seasons. He's a good player. He had largely a good playoffs. He had 2 stinker games in the finals, but 5 pretty good ones, right? He's a good player. He's on the team he fits the best within the league. TJ McConnell is probably also on the team he fits the best within the league. His extension is about to start this season, right? Shedding those guys' salaries, and it's not easy to trade them for no salary return in the current environment. They'd have to take back some money, right? But those two are different than Mathurin in that they are not extension eligible right now, and they are not free agents the following season. But they do have to think about if they're going to shed salary, right? If their spending limit is low, if it's close to the tax, if it's under the tax, whatever, you will hear those guys' names as like, are they available? Because that would be a way for the Pacers to shed money. So the money shedding tier is the guys who are in that close to, $8 to $14 million range, just because that's probably how close the Pacers will be to the tax line after a potential Turner deal. And that group of players is Mathurin, McConnell, Nesmith, and Toppin. Aaron Nesmith's like one of the more underpaid players in the NBA. We'll actually talk about him in a second. His contract is so good that trading him for less money does not actually help you, if that makes sense. Like a $25 million player making $11 million is not actually saving money. That's why more fairly paid players or players who are about to be paid more are the ones you talk about. And that's why those 3 will be central to the Pacers' money savings. And Mathurin becomes, to me, the second most interesting behind Turner player for the Pacers this offseason because of his current status with extensions and because of his free agency the following year. I'd be very curious what the Pacers think, because like if Haliburton was coming back, like, yep, keep everybody, no problem. Even if Haliburton was going to return during the season, it was like a half gap year, it'd be a little easier. But now it's just challenging to figure out how this all works. We'll see. But those are the 3 interesting guys to me. Little things that you need to know. 1, the DPE. Everybody's asking about this. The disabled player exception. Teams can apply for this if a player is believed to be out for the season. An independent physician group will review it with the NBA. If they agree, you get this exception. The Pacers got 2 last year, one for Isaiah Jackson and one for James Wiseman, because their Achilles tears kept them out for the season. So I got asked, can the Pacers apply for one for Haliburton because he got hurt during the last season? Yes, they can. The Warriors got one for Klay Thompson in 2019-20 after he got hurt in the 2019 finals. So the Pacers can apply for one. The value of it would be, to give you the full details, the value of a DPE when it's a disabled player exception is either half of a player's salary or the non-tax mid-level, whichever is lower. In this case, that's the non-tax mid-level. So a disabled player exception for Tyrese Haliburton would give the Pacers an extra salary cap exception of $14 million. However, anyone signed to that, A, has to be on a 1-year contract. They could trade for a player on a 1-year deal who fits in there as well. And B, counts against the cap and tax still. So they because of their spending limits, if they keep Turner, they functionally cannot use it, right? They could, yes, they can, air quotes, but they would blow past the aprons and their team would get so expensive that signing that player would really cost 3.5 times all their salary, and then you're talking about that player really cost the Pacers $60 million. Maybe they use like a very small percentage of it, but very unlike they should absolutely apply for it. It gives them a ton of flexibility. It could be a way for them to get trade exceptions, but it is functionally very hard for them to use. Same with any salary cap exception, the BAE, all the mid-levels, they're hard for the Pacers to use, especially if they keep Turner, which again, I think they should be trying to do. So that is the questions about the DPE I've been getting. Other stuff you need to know about this Pacers offseason. One, not enough talk about Isaiah Jackson. He's like, I've seen him running around. I have videos of him running around, practicing with heavier and not heavier balls at practice, right? If he's ready to go, seems like he could be a good choice. The backup five knows the system. He's like the perfect gap year player. Recover from an injury, see where he's at, see how he still fits. And he should want to sign with the Pacers because his value on the market probably took a big hit when he got hurt, right? He's probably not getting more than the minimum or just over the minimum anywhere in the league. But with the Pacers, if he signs with them, even on a 1-year deal for the minimum, he would have his full bird rights with the Pacers, and he would have that nowhere else. So that actually helps him, right? Because then in theory, if he has an awesome season, he could get paid more a year from now. I think it makes sense for the Pacers to not send him a qualifying offer, let him go to unrestricted free agency, but then explore a 1-year deal close to or near or at the minimum. I think that is something to explore. With Tony Bradley and Thomas Bryant, whoever you like more, I suppose would be worth having as a third center on the minimum. I think what the Pacers should be offering any third center is non-guaranteed minimum contract, take it or leave it, right? If neither of those guys want that, goodbye. If both of them want it, pick your favorite. But that's how I would handle those guys. It's not a criminal deal if they lose either. Both had their moments throughout the postseason, but if Isaiah Jackson is the backup, they're less important. If he's not the backup, then maybe offer guaranteed money. They're going to decline Tony Bradley's team option because they could get him for cheaper on a minimum deal. I already explained that, but just to reiterate, when you see that come through, that's why. Just an easy call there. Two other things, Ben Shepherd and Jarris Walker, they have rookie scale team options in their contract for their fourth year, so the 2026-27 season. Both no-brainers. Jarris Walker has played well enough and has the potential. Ben Shepherd plays all the time. They're cheap contracts. They'll be picked up. That's a formality. That will happen. They can do that anytime before the season starts, so it doesn't even have to happen until like October. The last thing, this will get buried on a lot of things because I don't expect it to happen, but it's possible. One, Aaron Nesmith is extension eligible this offseason because his contract was originally 4 years. Now it's been 2 because it was an extension. He is eligible for a 3-year extension. This is my estimate with a league average salary that someone else did the work for me on. But if this is correct, his 3-year extension would be about $63 million and would start in 2027-28. I'll say the same things I said about Andrew Nembhard. I would advise Aaron Nesmith not to take that if I was his advisor, but you wave $60 million in somebody's face, maybe they take it. I mean, good starters make more than that these days, and by that season, that will be pretty close to the mid-level. All the same things I said about Andrew Nembhard last year, but that's a lot of money. You just never know, and Nesmith might look not quite as good without Tyrese Haliburton. Everybody's going to have that happen to them. Does that change their value at all? Does that change their thinking? Who knows? But that is something else on the table. He is the only extension-eligible player on the Pacers. That is everything you need to know about the Pacers offseason. I could get into much more depth and will about many of these things, and we'll do so after the NBA draft, which is tonight and tomorrow. So assuming the Pacers have a quiet first night because they traded their pick already, and a great trade in hindsight, then Thursday's show, so tomorrow's on this podcast, will be me talking about the draft, what you need to know about the Pacers draft, the pick they have, why I think that they could trade up a little higher in the second round. And it relates to a lot of the stuff we talked about today and so much more. And then after the draft, once it's more set what the Pacers roster might look like, we can really dive into free agency one player at a time, one thing at a time until it starts the following Tuesday, although really it already started once the offseason began. In theory, the Pacers and Myles Turner could agree to a deal tomorrow, right? That's like what happened with Siakam last year. So there you go. Whew. The Pacers offseason from the highest level possible. Yossi Goslin will join at some point before free agency to talk about this stuff. I'll have other guests to get into way more detail about many of these things. Hope you guys learned something. If you think I messed something up, I don't think I did, but let me know by tweeting at me at Tony R. East or commenting down below on YouTube. That's also the best way to ask questions about any of the things that I talked about today. Thank you guys so much for listening. Off-season mode will be fun here. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East and Blue Sky Sam Handle. This podcast is at Locked On Pacers on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you all so much for listening today. Back tomorrow talking Pacers and the draft. Till then, everybody have a wonderful day.